star, Stanislav from Neo SPCC. He is the Chief Information Officer there, and they are the team behind Neo FS. Please take a moment to introduce yourself and your company, Stanislav.
Hello, everybody. We're just a small number of engineers working in St. Petersburg on the NEO infrastructure project. The main thing we do is the NeoFS and NeoGo. The NeoFS is a storage system integrated with the N3 blockchain, and NeoGo is the implementation of the N3 node that is capable of being the consensus node and the RPC node, and also it's a compiler and SDK and all the things around this.
Well, thank you, Stanislav. All right, we also have Stephen from Neo Global Development. He is head of NGD's Digital Asset Unit. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your work, Stephen.
Hello, everyone. This is Stephen from NGD Development Team. And we are working on infrastructures and protocol layers of Neo core and Neo related service. Okay, and thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Next up is Tyler from COZ, the group that brought us Dora the Blockchain Explorer, Neon Wallet, and several other key Neo apps. Please introduce yourself, Tyler.
Hi, I'm Tyler from COZ, and we work on a number of different things in the ecosystem, ranging from design work and advisory all the way down to core components, SDKs, compilers, and then the wallets and Explorer as well.
Thank you, Tyler. Also with us is Harry Pearson, Chief Architect at NGD Enterprise. He is the driving force behind products like the Neo Developer Toolkit. Please say a few words about you and your work, Harry.
Thanks. Yeah, as you said, my name is Harry. I am a part of a team here in Seattle of primarily ex-Microsoft employees who are focused now on improving the tool story for the Neo ecosystem. In the blockchain toolkit that was just mentioned includes the Neo Express, which is a developer-focused local version, local node that you can run for developer purposes, Neo Debugger, so that you can actually run your step through your blockchain contracts in Visual Studio Code, and the Visual Studio Visual Dev Tracker, so that you can actually get the same kind of a similar experience like was just mentioned for Dora the Explorer, the Blockchain Explorer, for your local node running inside of Visual Studio Code.
Thank you, Harry. And finally, we have Gil from AX Labs, the group behind Neo, 3J, and other key products for Neo and 3 Java developers. Give us a few details about yourself and your work, Gil.
Hello, guys. I'm Gil, part of the AX Labs team. So I joined Neo like late or in early 2018. And since then, we've been building various tools to make the developer experience on Neo as smooth and intuitive as possible, mainly with Neo3j, which is an SDK and also a compiler or a development toolkit for Kotlin and Java. But also we are in other projects like Neo Playground and most recently GrantShares DAO. So yeah, these days we are also very into DAOs and these topics. But happy to be part of the panel, Robert.
Great. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. The first infrastructure component that we are going to discuss is NeoFS. NeoFS is a powerful, revolutionary file system that is the key to a brand new wave of secure, decentralized applications that will offer unparalleled flexibility and features to Neo N3 dApps. Stanislav, what can you tell us about the current state of NeoFS?
Well, it's up and running. It's deployed in both N3 testnet and mainnet. And right now we are focusing on the user experience and developer experience, which is almost the same thing right now for NeoFS. So we are working on the improvements of the API layer and integration with the DApps and web apps. So right now we're working with COZ on the Wallet Connect integration. So When it's done, any user could have the web application working with NeoFS and signing requests using Wallet Connect protocol and Neon Wallet, for example. We're also working on the REST API improvement. So right now, the NeoFS has its own high-performance gRPC protocol and different sets of protocol gateways to allow working with traditional protocols like HTTP, S3, SFTP. And for the web applications, we have the HTTP gateway, which covers more or less most typical web application scenarios like putting objects, getting objects, even downloading a list of objects in a zip file, so things like that. But we're willing to improve this with them. REST-like API support for the NeoFS. So you could use Wallet Connect to authenticate users and regular REST API to interact with NeoFS just from your front end. So it will be easier to use really widely adopted web frameworks, like, for example, React to write the distributed applications, which will have even the storage layer truly distributed. So
great. Thank you for that detailed answer. Are there any new features you feel developers would be especially interested in?
The Wallet Connect, actually, that's what is in our mind for this hackathon, because we think it will allow for just any experienced web developer to dive into the blockchain world.
Excellent. And are there any new features beyond that one that developers probably aren't aware of yet?
Right now, we mostly work on the stabilizing stuff. So there are not many exciting new features coming in the nearest future. The most exciting thing is the better documentation that will be published soon. We're working on the doc side. And maybe the CDN, the NeoFS CDN project that was announced last year, and it's in the test now. It's deployed in the testnet. Maybe nearest time, we will be able to launch it in the mainnet or to make it open for the broader public. So that's the project that functions just like a regular web CDN, but it's backed by NeoFS and N3 smart contracts. So if anybody wants to develop the DApp integrated with NeoFS and N3, the distribution layer and the hosting, it will be also powered by N3 network, NeoFS, and NeoFS CDN. But that's it's working right now in the testnet, but we want to announce the availability to the wider public a little bit later.
Excellent. And what is the current state of cross-language support for NeoFS? Can you tell us which programming languages have full support and which ones are still a work in progress?
Oh, right now, the reference implementation we have in Go language. There is a C# SDK, which is feature, we have feature parity between almost feature parity with C# and Go. There is a prototype in Python, and there is an amazing piece of work done by XLab for porting the NeoFS API to Java and Kotlin, but I think Gil will tell about this more. They have an interesting approach, a little bit different from what we were expecting from the API implementations.
Excellent. Thank you, Stanislav. And I would like to point out to the audience that NeoFS is awesome. Who else would like to talk about NeoFS? Anybody?
Yeah, I don't know. Seems like Stanislav just mentioned my name. I think I should tell something here about this cross-language support. the thing is, I mean, is not rocket science, but people just approach us, X Labs, and say, "Look, Gil, I'm planning I'm doing a backend in Java or Kotlin, and do you have like APIs for NeoFS?" And our answer so far is no. We're planning for it, but we don't have it right in the moment, because also it's quite complicated and complex to rewrite part of the codes from Golang and port to Java and Kotlin, because different bindings, different like data types, etc., etc. So like I just had a discussion with our team at X Labs, with Claude and Mihi, and we decided to take an approach which will decrease maintainability over time. So basically, what we're doing is to take the Golang reference implementation of the clients of NeoFS, and then take key features or key methods, key actions, and then do a shared library in C. Then like many languages like Python or Java, Kotlin, or others can rely on this shared library for different platforms, for ARM, AMD 64, like Intel, like Mac, whatever. So and then like it becomes a bit easier, this maintainability part, because you just have to plug your Java Kotlin wrapper and point to this how can I say, to this shared library, to this lower level implementation translated from Golang, which is the reference implementation for this NeoFS client. So we've done already a prototype of this. There are pros and cons. People would agree, would maybe ask me, yeah, Gil, but by doing this, you're killing the key feature of portability from like Java and other like languages, because you're using something compiled, to the platform. But I think like in this case, it makes sense, because it's something more for backends. That people would use, like maybe in backend, and it's a more controlled environment. So I think it would make more sense. But we are planning to release something, really soon. We don't have like a specific date yet. It was targeted for the hackathon, but we are under development yet. But yeah, what I can tell you is that really soon, UFS will also be supported in Kotlin and Java.
Wow, fantastic. Tyler, from the COZ perspective, would you like to add anything to the NeoFS discussion?
I think the biggest thing that is what Stanislav already mentioned, right? So we've been collaborating with them on getting the Wallet Connect integration up. So that will hopefully significantly improve the kind of the end user experience or the developer experience. That's been a pretty big focus. Also for kind of the COZ team, we've been making a lot of effort on, how can we improve the developer experience within the ecosystem? So, it kind of fits really well with our direction as well. But yeah, I'm very excited about the documentation improvements as well. Not that we don't have our own really large backlog of documentation improvements to make. I think that's probably a common thread that the community is familiar with in our ecosystem, but we're trying. I know it's it's definitely a priority for everybody here. It's hard when the development is outpacing a lot of the time for that, though. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Docs are key, and Neo N3 is moving quickly. Okay, Harry, is there anything you'd like to add about NeoFS and the Neo Developer Toolkit?
It's an area that we need to focus on a little bit as we move up the stack. This whole panel is primarily about the higher level infrastructure that is built on top of or is available to Neo N3 developers. And obviously, from a tools perspective, we had to start with the basics, right? That's where things like the debugger and Express come in. But as we move up that stack, we want to be able to start taking advantage of all of the different technologies that we're going to be talking about here today. I've been doing a little bit of work on NeoID, which we'll talk about later, obviously, and there's already support for Oracle's tool support for NeoFS is one of the things that's on our backlog, but we haven't really gotten to yet.
Excellent. Thank you. And Stephen, would you like to have the last word on the NeoFS?
I think we are the first one who use NeoFS on mainnet. We use it to store our logo files in the governance page.
Oh.
I think it's a really great application. And nowadays, I see a lot of NFT marketplace use NeoFS to store their NFT metadata, images, videos as well. So I'm looking forward to more people to use it.
Right. I believe SkyHut, the NFT marketplace,
Yes,
is
SkyHut.
using NeoFS. That's great news. All right. So let us move on to oracles. Oracles are the crucial link between smart contracts and the world at large, allowing smart contracts to receive real-world data when they need it in a robust manner. Unlike other blockchains, oracles are a native part of the Neo N3 platform and have built-in protections against data plagiarism. Stephen, would you mind explaining to the audience why it is so important to have oracles as a native blockchain component?
Okay, I think Oracle is very important features for each blockchain, not only Neo, but also other blockchains, because oracles are data feeds that can let smart contracts, dApps, can fetch data from the real world, like the price in the exchange or price of some real events. And that makes everyone every developer in the ecosystem want to have the Oracle. And there are different types of blockchain Oracle service now. And some of them are like first-party Oracle. These first-party Oracle means the data provider makes the API themselves provide this data in the contract and let people to read from them. And this will bring some trust problem if they make some fake data or the single point service failure. It's really bad for those developer and the dApps. And the other ones are some third-party oracles like Chainlink or like Band protocol. They provide some nodes and to have some price feeders, and they are decentralized. But the problem of them is you can not make sure it's a very stable service as well, and some of them are very expensive. So what Neo brings in the N3 network is a native Oracle service, like it's out of chain data access service built in N3 directory. And every developers, every dApps can read external data resource in the smart contracts, and that's very great for the dApp developers. And it's kind of a combination of the first party and third party Oracle, and it has a decentralized consensus process to make sure all the data are correct and pass the result in the callback functions to the smart contract.
Yeah, and while we're on that, how do Neo N3 oracles protect smart contracts that use them against data plagiarism? Is that where the consensus algorithm comes in?
Okay, the first of all, the Oracle node has some consensus algorithm in yet, and secondly, like I have to explain how these four Oracle nodes, because Neo on N3 we have the Neo console, which consists of 21 members who are managing and who are governing the whole network, and the console members will assign 4 Oracle nodes to run the consensus progress to make sure all the data are correct. So these four Oracle nodes will get rewarded for each correct Oracle request, but they will also get penalized when even replaced by some other Oracle nodes if they get some wrong data.
Okay, so they have a big economic stake in getting it right. Well, that's good. Are there any features that have recently been added to oracles that developers probably aren't aware of yet?
Recently, no, because we this is a native contract binding to the N3 itself. But we are considering make the price of the Oracle request much cheaper than before. Now it's like 0.5 gas per request, but we think it's too expensive. We are considering to decrease the price of it.
Oh, that's great. What also I'd like to ask, what is the current state of cross-language support for oracles?
I think because Oracle is a native contract service, so every programming language in the new ecosystem can support it. I think C# new W3GA already support it. I use it. I think Go and Python supports it as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, so let's open it up to the panel. Does anybody else have anything they would like to add about oracles, perhaps wallet support or Neo Global Developer Toolkit support or anything like that?
Yeah, well, let me talk a little bit about the tool support for it. And to feed on something that Stephen just said, Oracles is implemented as a native contract, similar to the Neo and GAST and the contract management APIs that are native contracts in Neo and 3. So it's available to any language, any contract language that you want to use. You invoke the, when you're writing a smart contract, it's just another API. So all of the different languages that are represented on this panel have support for the native contracts, and Oracle's is just one of the other native contracts. From a developer tools perspective, one of the things that we actually don't have a full Oracle's implementation that goes off and retrieves data from the network, from the internet. Because part of the idea that we want for our developer tools is for them to be deterministic. Obviously, determinism is a very key part of any kind of blockchain solution in the context of, we're going to run these contracts on all the different nodes and they all have to come to the same answer. But it's also important from a developer purpose for the purposes of testing. And if you're going to build a test where you're going to run an Oracle, you're writing a contract that uses Oracles, you make an Oracle request, it's going to go out, and if you actually have an actual Oracle implementation in your developer toolkit, then it'll go off to the internet and it'll grab some data. And then how do you test that? And so not only is it important to be able to have determinism in that all of the different nodes on the blockchain get the same answer, you also have to have determinism in your tools, so that way you always give it the same answer, so that way your tests continue to succeed. So we actually have sort of a stub implementation of Oracles in the blockchain toolkit in Neo Express. So you can make it at request. Again, Neo Express is a full-blown Neo blockchain node, similar to like Neo CLI. It just has a bunch of additional features for developers. Like, I want to roll my blockchain all the way back to Genesis, not something you do on mainnet or testnet, but that you do in development all the time. It would be bad to do that for main. Don't use Neo Express for mainnet or testnet. But for Oracles, when you make the request, there's nothing that's explicitly listening for it the way that Oracles would on a public network like mainnet or testnet. There are commands in Neo Express that you can say, show me a list of all of the outstanding Oracle requests. And you can also then say, I want to respond to it. And you point it at a file on your file system. So that way you can explicitly respond at, that way you can control the timing of it. When do I want to respond? And the content, exactly what content is responded to in this Oracle request. So that's been there since we shipped the N3 compatible, the initial mainnet version of the blockchain toolkit. So that's been there and it's ready to use today.
Fantastic. And by the way, this is another example of a feature that comes about from the interaction of having the developer and debugger tools interfacing with the native oracles on Neo N3, is that you find that kind of support directly in the developer toolkit. And that is a big plus. And I'm speaking as a developer. Okay, Gil, I saw you nodding your head emphatically about determinism. Is there something that you wanted to add about that?
Well, not specifically about determinism, but because this is something that I haven't talked to the participants of the panel beforehand, but since we're doing this panel for a hackathon and to inspire people, sometimes I ask myself, what are the features or the use cases that we could think of on using oracles, just to inspire a bit, like the participants, the audience. I don't know if any of us have like a good kind of a nice use case. But because I mean, I'll start. I'm really into DAOs these days. Like because of grant shares. You guys are gonna hear about grant shares next week. But anyway, so something that I've been thinking is we could, or someone building a DAO could use oracles to fetch information about an external system, which is deterministic, of course, that would influence the stake of participation in this DAO. So let's suppose that I'll give a very, very simple example here. Imagine that you're building a DAO that gives voice to people who contributes to a GitHub repository, let's say. And the more code that you contribute to this repository, the more voice you have in this DAO, or the more stake in the decision power you have in this DAO. So like you could maybe, there are like several problems on this, but you could maybe use an oracle to fetch the contributions or how much each person contributed to this repository and bring on chain to to build functions in the decision power of this DAO. So like this kind of examples, I think it's good to mention, is not directly connected to what Harry was talking before, but use case is important, and I think just exposing it's good for the hackathon. I don't know if anyone has any other use case in this direction.
Just to piggyback on that a little bit. So for the past couple of years, at least in Colorado and the US, there's been a big focus primarily for oracles to standardize the API for all the government bodies. So that's been a really kind of big focus for the Department of IT here, right? And one of the reasons is that then you have a very standard format to use for data aggregation in smart contracts. So, to Gil's point, the idea being that you could go out and access some trusted authority's body of data and pull that in, and then maybe use that either from a regulatory standpoint, when you're talking about like having actual like contractual agreements on chain, or legal agreements or obligations, or anything from just checking, and we'll probably talk about identity in a little bit, but like validating a driver's license, for example, or like authenticating. There are a lot of use cases there. There's definitely been an off-chain drive to facilitate these types of features.
Well, thank you, Tyler. And by everyone out there who's in the Oracle track of the Polaris Hackathon, I hope you're taking notes. And if you're not in the hackathon yet, please sign up right now. Some awesome prizes. Harry, is anything you want to add about that?
No, I talked about that Oracle support in the blockchain toolkit already. I'm good.
Okay, but we're talking about use cases. I thought you might have a use case you're interested in.
I focus on tools, man. People tell me the use cases.
Okie dokie. All right.
For the use cases,
go ahead, Stanislav, please.
For the use cases, there was a workshop recorded in the devlog track last year by Alexey Ivanin. And it shows how to use oracles in the simple use case of a game, where the oracle fetches the game items and can set the price when you exchange the items or other game goods. You can buy and sell them. And maybe during a hackathon, someone would like to create this game, which can have the NFT assets and exchange them using some prices or other stuff taken through the Oracle interface. And by the way, oracles can fetch data not only from the regular internet, but also from the NeoFS. It's one of the interfaces to use NeoFS directly from the smart contract.
Great. And later I will put a link to that devlog with Alexey Ivanin in the Discord channel, so you can look for it there. Okay, so Stephen or anybody else want to talk about use cases?
You mean the use case of Oracle?
Yeah.
I think use case will be the lending protocol. Oracle is a very key component for the lending protocol. like for the users who borrow amount of money, if the price of the collateral decreased or the borrowed money increased, the price they have to be liquidated. The price should be fetched from Oracle from outside exchanges. So the Oracle is very key important for the lending protocols.
Yeah, I could see Oracle being absolutely crucial for DeFi.
Yes.
Okay, going once, going twice before we move on to Neo ID.
I don't want to open the can of worms, but it's also pretty valuable when we start talking about cross-chain integrations.
Oh, yeah.
Oracles are very valuable when we talk about cross-chain, but I don't want to go into that can of worms because that's probably going to trigger like a 3-hour-long conversation at this point.
Absolutely.
But still, that's a great point. Okay, so finally, we have Neo ID, the newest member of the core infrastructure suite for N3. Tyler, would you mind explaining to the viewers what it means for an ID to be sovereign? And please explain what a claim is and how a digital claim contrasts with a claim by an ID provider in the analog world.
Sure. And we did this. Actually, a lot of people have probably heard me give this example in the past, but I'm going to use a driver's license because that's the really great example of sovereign identity, right? And the main concept here is that there isn't a central authority that does a check at the time of verification to authenticate you, right? So when we look at a driver's license, and I'm going to use this blank card here as an example, since I don't want to flash my driver's license on live YouTube stream that's also recorded and published. But when you go and you get your driver's license or your national identity card, there are a number of checks that this issuing body does to verify that you are who you say you are, although they tell you who you are anyways, but it's another story. Then they issue this card to you, right? And on this card, they have a number of cryptographic artifacts, right? Which allow anybody to look at that identity card and certify within some reasonable confidence that it is an official identity card that's been issued by this agency, right? Which is universally trusted as being like the law of the land, right? So for example, like if you go to a brewery, generally they check your ID to see if you're old enough to buy a beer. And then, they look to see, is it a fake ID or not? They're looking for these cryptographic artifacts, right? Same thing with money or cash, actually, not credit cards. So cash is also sovereign, right? There are cryptographic artifacts, like whenever you use cash or your driver's license for something, they don't pull like the central body, right, to verify that it's an authentic driver's license and that the driver's license is valid. They look at the cryptographic artifacts to identify that. And then there's an expiration date associated with it as well, right? Same thing with cash. Anyways, that's an example of a sovereign identity. In comparison, if you went and you used your driver's license and then there was a poll to the government to verify and say, what is the data? Is that accurate or not? That would not be a sovereign identity, right? Because this central authority can revoke your access. They can choose not to verify you or certify you at the time of check, right? And we see that with like your debit card, for example, right? So debit cards, there's not like sovereign currency there, right, in your bank account. You don't have full control over that. So there's a lot of similarities there with like custodial versus non-custodial, although in the identity space, we talk about the term sovereign, right? So in the digital space, we have an analog to this driver's license concept, and it's called, at least in blockchain, it's called like decentralized self-sovereign identity, where you can imagine this central authority or this trusted body issuing a certificate to somebody. However, all those cryptographic artifacts are distilled down into a signature, right? So in the real world, we keep adding and adding and adding, kind of in a duct tape fashion, trying to create these physical cryptographic artifacts, which can exist to allow verification, to the point where we actually there is like a printed signature on physical objects, for example. In the digital world, it's a lot simpler. This body has a key, right? They publish their public key, and then they sign these data sets, which are then stored and given to the actual user, the person that they're about. And this is called a claim, right? So let's say I'm this body that's either trusted or not trusted, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to make a statement about Gil, for example. I'm going to say, Gil is awesome, we'll say. He is. So what I would do is I publish my public key and I say, this is my key. You can verify that I made this statement about Gil. And then I'm going to give Gil a certificate that says Gil is awesome, right? And there's going to be a signature on it that proves that I said so, right? And anybody on Earth can take my public key and they can verify that I was the one that created that claim, right? Now Gil can take that, his identity or his key, and he can go anywhere. Let's say he goes to a brewery, for example, and he wants to prove that I said that Gil is awesome. So Gil would authenticate with his private key or his key, right? So he would basically sign a challenge message, which proves that he is Gil, he owns this identity, right? And then he would also, and this is where things get a little more complicated regarding how the data is stored, which is another wormhole. He would effectively issue proof or access in some way to that claim, which allows him to prove that I said that he's awesome, right? And because my signature is on that message, anybody can go back and verify that I actually said that. It was my account or my key that generated that data set, right? Now, there are a lot of different schemes for that, depending on your regulatory needs and the data sensitivity, but that's generally the concept, and that's how that's really what a self-sovereign identity is. It's really the idea that I give somebody a certificate that is provable. They don't need to go ask me. Like Gil doesn't need to tell the brewery, hey, brewery, go ask Tyler if he still thinks you're awesome or I'm awesome. He doesn't have to say that. He has a certificate that proves that at a certain time I said it, right? And I know a lot of people that are probably listening to this think, well, everything is like that. That's how the world works generally, but it's not. Like in the US, and I use this example a lot. Like in the US, if you want to prove that you have a degree, for example, you actually have to go through a central authority to get them to issue you proof that you have a college degree in a certain field. And if you, in certain situations, like say you are defaulted on your student loans, they're actually these bodies are motivated to refute that. They can choose not to verify your degree, that you have a degree. So that's not the case in a lot of countries. So in Singapore, for example, they actually do issue you this self-sovereign certificate or claim that allows you to prove that you have a degree. There are a lot of countries that do that. I think China also is starting to do that as well. And if I'm not incorrect, I believe Russia also does this, or some universities do. So it is catching on. But the nice thing about blockchain is that they become immutable also, right? You don't have to worry about losing the file. So
right. So the key benefit here is that sovereignty, they cannot take it away from you, like your money in an American bank. All right. What are some of the other benefits a decentralized digital ID provides compared to a centralized ID in the analog world? Can you tell us that?
Yeah, so there's a really, and this is going to be like my warmer warmer use case. So in the scenario where like a country implodes, for example, I have a number of friends who have immigrated into the US, especially like transfer. So I was a university transfer student, right? So there were a lot of people who would come to the US and they would have maybe like a PhD in mechanical engineering, for example. So I was really good friends with this very intelligent engineer from Cyprus, and he immigrated to the US, but there was no way for him to clearly verify that he actually had a degree or what that looked like, right? Or you can imagine if somebody leaves a country for one reason or another, but there's no infrastructure left in that governing body to authenticate this person. There's no identity. There's nothing, like even the papers, like even the self-sovereign identity, like the driver's license, for example, from this country. If the country literally does not exist anymore, how do they verify anything about themselves? How do you even prove that like your kids are your kids, right? This solves that issue, right? The decentralized self-sovereign identity really resolves that, because as long as you have your key and you have access to this immutable ledger, you effectively get all of that proof, all of that information back. And you can prove cryptographically that you are that entity or that persona. So that's, to me, like a really valuable use case. I'm sure somebody out there will find a way to make a ton of money exploiting people that are immigrating using this platform or this solution. But there are a lot of really, really valuable kind of humanitarian proposals. For me, I really just want to be able to use Neon Wallet and go down the street to my brewery and give them a Boolean like verification that I'm old enough to drink. That's like that's my first goal with identity, I think.
Excellent. But while I've got you on this, Gil, please go ahead.
No, I was going to say that this is a great goal, by the way. Yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, go ahead, Robert. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say, well, I got you guys on the wallet side of things. Do you foresee COZ adding any Neo ID specific features to the wallets?
Yeah, I mean the obvious one is me being able to go to a brewery and buy a beer. I think there are a lot of the
not all of us need to be able to prove that cryptographically anymore. I just want to point that out.
I can use my face.
I'm there, although I think Colorado is a little more liberal with that. But the big thing around identity that is missing, that's kind of critical in the ecosystem, is the authentication or advanced authentication mechanisms. Right now, when you want to, let's say you have, and I'll use a really short, brief example of this. Let's say you build an application that rewards people for completing a tutorial, right? Or tweeting something, right? There isn't really a way to prove or even secure that against somebody just creating another account and doing it again. There's nothing like, and we've seen a number of schemas over the years. I've been in identity now for about 4.5 years, and there still isn't really a good solution to that besides, DSSI.
DSSI?
It's decentralized self-sovereign identity. The issue still remains that, like, if I have a tutorial, for example, and I want to award somebody 5 gas for completing the tutorial, even if I can authenticate, I can log somebody in and prove they own a key pair. There's nothing stopping them from just creating another key pair and doing it again and getting the gas. Like, you can use these like duct tape solutions where we look at like the first transaction date of the account and like all of this stuff to try to limit it. But then you're locking out new users who are potentially valuable. There's nothing that really secures that type of experience. And I realized that like verifying your email address doesn't really get around that. but that's an age-old technique in like the web, right? Like that's kind of that does cut a lot of these experiences out. And you can go further than that with DSSI, right? So you could even go as far as KYCing somebody, for example, which really cuts that down. And you can keep adding, depending on what you are doing, you can add these layers of authentication in a secure and safe way for both parties, the identity and the application. So it's there are a lot of pretty important components that enable dApps there, but it's primarily on the authentication side and how authentication works, which is why we've started kind of pushing on authentication through like Wallet Connect and with the Neon wallets, for example.
Fantastic. Yeah, I would really like to see that. Is there anything else you'd like to say about NeoID, Tyler?
I'll get off the soapbox since I sound like I'm getting preachy. The habit of going on and on and on and on.
I enjoyed what you had to say, and I think it was fantastic. All right, Harry, I believe you have some interesting features planned for the Neo Blockchain Toolkit to support NeoID. Would you mind telling us about them?
Well, one of the things that's interesting about NeoID relative to, say, oracles, as we were talking about before, is that oracles is native to the core Neo platform, right? It's implemented. Obviously, you can write smart contracts for Neo in C#, but oracles like Neo, like Neo the token, not Neo the blockchain, the Neo token, the gas token, the contract management, the ledger. These are all native contracts. They ship in the box, as you will, for the Neo platform as contracts. So they look like contracts, but they aren't deployed like normal contracts. You have to upgrade the entire platform in order to make changes to them. NeoID is actually a deployable contract, which is, I'm not sure that's a term that's widely used across the Neo ecosystem, but as a tools developer, it's a term that I tend to use to be able to distinguish between these two types of contracts. So from the perspective of the person invoking them, they're similar, right? You use contract call if you're going to make a call to another contract. That's the core native API. Different languages expose that in different ways. But NeoID is actually a deployable contract. So we've actually made some changes to it recently in order to make it more easily deployable to Neo Express. And so we're working on, and what's really exciting about this for me personally is there's obviously, there's a lot of importance associated with the native contracts on the platform, but the next generation of, cool stuff that's going to come isn't going to be inside the platform, right? So integration with NeoFS and integration with NeoID and other stuff that could, other types of middleware projects that come down the pipe. Will mentioned the grant share stuff. These are all going to be deployable contracts. So this is going to lead for the tooling an opportunity to build out a set of core infrastructure, tooling infrastructure for handling deployable contracts. So, how do I get NeoID into my local environment in order to be able to test it, right? And so we're looking at those kinds of things. So we're near the beginning of this kind of work right now, but that's the kind of stuff that we're working on. And I think that that's going to benefit not just NeoID, obviously, having a set of extensible commands to be able to do things like I want to issue a grant. Like I don't want to have to go and write up a whole, Neo invoke file or, come up with some complicated transaction. I want to be able to just sort of say, Neo Express ID grant share, not grant share, grant claim. The branding is already stuck in my head. Well, grant claim, whatever. I want to be able to just say that on the command line in order to make it easy. And then, of course, I also want to be able to have some kind of UI running inside of Visual Dev Tracker so that I can do that with my mouse and point and click rather than typing it on the keyboard. I realize not everybody is as familiar and comfortable on the command line as I am personally. I that's where I live, but not all developers do. And so we want to meet developers. That's one of our core goals at NGD Enterprise. We want to meet developers where they are. So we want to be able to deliver a series of tools. NeoID will be one of the first ones that we focus on for these deployable contracts. But I think that that's going to be a consistent set of infrastructure that we can use across the entire ecosystem for any kind of deployable contract. So it's pretty exciting.
It's extremely exciting. And I'm not just saying that as a host, I'm saying that because I'm a Neo N3 developer. Okay, Stephen or Stanislav, do you have anything you'd like to say about Neo ID? Any connections, any dApps you'd like to see?
Well, in NeoFS, we have a problem with misbehaving nodes that get disconnected from the network, and we want to prevent them to re-register again. And that was one of the features we wanted to use NeoID for, but that's still on the way. So we still hope to do it. So that's one of the problems Tyler mentioned, but not in the real world, but more localized to blockchain.
Yeah, it really does seem like Neo ID is one of those pieces that can enhance a whole lot of other parts of the Neo N3 ecosystem or any blockchain ecosystem. Stephen, anything to close this out with?
I think no, but new ID now is still like a framework or a kind of library. I'm looking for more people or DApps who of some team who can join this framework to implement something real applications.
I agree. All right. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A part of the live stream. If you have any questions at all, here's your chance to ask the heavyweights in the Neo ecosystem your questions. Please put them either in the YouTube live chat or in the Discord devlog channel, and we will pass them on to the panel. Oh, Gil, are you waving your hand or? Gil?
It was just a light here. It was just a light here. So fine. I deceived some people. Yeah, no problem.
Oh, it looks so interesting. Oh, well. Okay, so we are waiting for questions. In the meantime, while we wait for questions, I would like to ask if anybody could have a fever dream and say what kind of dApps or dApp you would like to see for the Polaris Hackathon, something using these new pieces, something really special. What would that look at? Would anyone like to pick that up?
Sure. So I have a couple thoughts that would be really interesting to see. And people are going to joke, and Joe's probably going to laugh at this, but this kind of goes back all the way to the first hackathon that was in the Neo ecosystem. And I'm actually a hardware engineer that pretends to be a software engineer. But having like real world interactions with the blockchain is really interesting to me. Even if that's, and I feel like I'm shilling Wallet Connect here, but any integration tool, but like hacking together a vending machine, for example, where like I can go and I can authenticate and buy Coke with like gas, for example, things like that would be really awesome. I know it's not like this crazy novel thing, and the blockchain uses light, but from a product perspective, that's really valuable for people to see these real world use cases. And that kind of stuff, again, it packages really nicely as something that can be sold. So things like just hardware integration. This is actually not a car, it's like an NFC chip blank, right? So things like that, things that interface with the real world are really interesting. We're physical creatures. So people like to touch things and see things move and light up. So anything like that would be really interesting to me. I think there's still a lot of room in how we can use the wallet interactivity. We've been discussing internally, like how to use smart contracts for advanced features that are more specific to wallet uses. Things like that are kind of interesting to me, but that's where my brain's at. I have a bit of a vested interest in like branching code and non-deterministic code execution. So that's a really interesting and fun area. I know we talked about determinism in code earlier. This is kind of different from that, but having code that executes differently every time is very interesting to me. but that's because I used to be a statistical modeler. So things like that are very cool. I'm also really keen to see how NeoFS gets integrated in some of these projects. I think that'll be very interesting as well. There's a pretty, we talk about blue ocean, that's pretty blue ocean. I think, it's great that we're using that to store NFTs and these images. Right now, I'm interested in seeing where we go kind of next, where we have these larger scale use cases built around it. So, where we have these full websites deployed there, things like that. So things built around NeoFS, I'm very interested in seeing as well.
Yes, we all are. And on that note, Epic Lion in the chat has a suggestion for a dApp. He would like to see a Dropbox-like dApp that utilizes NeoFS. And I can't say any more, but you're going to be pleasantly surprised real soon, Epic Lion. Thank you for that question. Okay, Stanislav, your ears must be burning. We're talking about NeoFS. Anything you'd like to see?
I'd like to see something that works with a limited internet connections. So things that would be really distributed. So right now, most of the blockchain and DApp applications require internet connection work from the device, which is always online. So I would like to see more of the offline first, or local first applications working with Neo blockchain. They may synchronize data from time to time, or they may use the mesh network for sending out transactions or data or anything else, and to use some kind of a distributed proof of validity of the data. So things that can work locally with a limited internet connection. That what I personally would like to see, because that's I'm also the hardware engineer pretending to be data engineer. So things that work autonomously, that's what I think will be interesting for me personally to see in this hackathon.
Yeah, mesh network integration would be fascinating. Okay, Gil, now that you've managed to tame your light, do you have any things that you would like to see for the hackathon?
Yes, yeah. Well, I was turning on my light here, that comes from my brain that I can have like these ideas. No, anyway, so yeah, I'm also like some similar to Harry. I build tools. We at X Labs, we try to touch this developer experience and like building this infrastructure, but when it comes to the apps, I always have like ideas and say, no, I'm not going to pursue this. This is actually a good idea, but like I have more things, to do in the infrastructure and the core level. And then like we start piling up ideas and things that we would like to do, and we never do. We just put it like in the drawer and say, okay, I'm going to do this later. But I think this is a nice opportunity to talk about this, at least some of them. To the hackathon. So I would just pose a single question here. Why, after 40 years of internet history, we don't have yet our emails encrypted and verified? So like, I mean, if you think about this, it's crazy. Like, why? It's we have like PGP. We have like private and public key. We have key servers. I don't know if people know here key servers, what it is. Basically, key servers are servers with a specific protocol that once I want to know, for example, Tyler's public key, I just go to the server and say, look, I have the email of Tyler. Can you give me the public key? That I can verify like messages that he sent to me and this kind of stuff. So like, I mean, we have like many key servers in the internet. Originally we had the MIT key server, which was wrote by Horowitz. Yeah, exactly this guy, this guy from Anderson and Horowitz from the VC. So he wrote back in the days a key server, and after that, other key servers just got along. We have key servers for package managers like Ubuntu or NPM, and it's all across, like all over. And the people have to pay for infrastructure to maintain this stuff. So I always wonder, like, why? I mean, why we have like all this infrastructure, but people still don't encrypt and don't verify emails? Why is that? Okay, maybe it's because of standards. Maybe it's because of like that people don't care about this, or people lose their keys. Yeah, we can have like a lot of different excuses. But I think like having Neo and blockchain, and especially Neo ID, Neo FS, and oracles, and like all these things together, it's a perfect combination on having on enabling, for example, a key server, a distributed key server, which people could, create an identity and then like publish also your email address with your new name, NNS, all associated to it. So the difficult part here will be to integrate this smart contracts, this kind of key server on Neo to mail servers, mail clients. That you can say, oh, I have this email. I'm going to publish to this registry on Neo, and then like other people can, when receiving an email or receiving a message, can verify it, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, this is just like just my thoughts about this topic. One of the ideas that I had the other day.
Yeah, things like an integrated key saver would be a big boon to usability, especially if it was integrated with mail clients. Harry, is there anything that you'd like to see from the magic DApp genie?
I just wanted to point out two things about what Will just said. Number one, the way he says key server, I just love hearing that. I just want to get that on a loop. That's awesome. Your accent for that is. The other thing is, it is kind of crazy when you stop and think about the amount of time and effort that has been spent on trying to upgrade every single web server on the entire internet to use HTTPS, and yet we're not trying to apply that same kind of enforcement over the arguably more important, like I don't need to secure my blog, right? It's public. There's nothing secret about it. Why do I need to run HTTPS on it? But yeah, my emails, that's probably kind of important to be able to authenticate and to encrypt in a lot more important way. Other than that, I build tools. So my big thing that I always get out of these I love these hackathons. I love participating as a mentor and as part of the community. I was asked during the last one why I wasn't one of the judges. And one of the reasons I pointed out to the person who was asking is if I'm a judge, then I can't actually be in the trenches helping people on Discord, right? It wouldn't be fair for me to, provide guidance to one team and not provide guidance to another team, and then have to judge those solutions. That just wouldn't be a very fair thing. And I'd much rather be doing what I am now, because I learned so much from these types of opportunities and these types of operations. So for me, it's not so much about the specific types of DApps that get built, but for the opportunity for me to interact with the teams that are building them and figure out what we can do to help the next generation be even more productive on the Neo blockchain.
Right. And given your positioning in the software space, every entry that comes into the contest will be affected by your wonderful tools. All right, Stephen, as the head of NGD DAO, what would you like to see in this hackathon? We'll give you the last word on this one.
So for this hackathon, I'm looking for, because personally, I'm really interested in DeFi projects. So first type of application I'm really looking for is lending protocol. As I said just when we talk about Oracle, I think lending protocol is very important and very interesting DeFi projects, and it's a key component for the new DeFi ecosystem. And the second type of application of the apps I'm looking forward to is maybe some interesting GameFi or some interesting DAO related projects, which really popular recently. Yeah, that's my two preference.
And I would like to point out that you mentioned lending twice. So if anybody out there in the dev community that's listening, take notes. All right.
Okay.
Anything anybody else would like to say on this topic or in general before we close this out? Going once, going twice, going
Good
three
luck,
times.
everybody.
There we go.
I know we're all very excited to see what shows up. I'm always surprised by what our community has in store for these. The last hackathon was really exciting, and there were a lot of really interesting projects. So I'm really excited now that all the tools are even more mature to see what happens.
Anyone else? And thank you very much. All right, then. All right, I want to give a special thanks to our illustrious panel of guests today. I also want to thank all of you watching today for tuning in. And of course, a huge thanks to all the great people at Neo Global Development. Your passion drives our innovation. And just goodbye, everybody. And it's always great to see all your faces.